Chaos, lawlessness, frustration. Do you feel like something bigger is happening here? Do you feel like the country you love is under attack? That basic things like common decency, goodness, Americanism, they're all under attack. Do you feel stressed? How about demoralized, beat down? Feel like maybe you no longer have a voice? Feel like you no longer even have a choice? Are you in law enforcement? Are you still in law enforcement? Have you quit in the last few weeks? You know, I wouldn't blame you. In fact, notable officers, good officers, have had enough. A former officer said recently, when I was risking my life, that was one thing. My family and I, we knew what we were into and I was okay with it. However, after recent events, I'm no longer simply risking my life. I'm risking my family's safety and well-being. This week, I heard a popular radio host exclaim, "This is God's country." And you know what? He is absolutely correct. I'm not saying we are God's chosen people. That's a different conversation, and we are not. What I am saying is that this is God's country. And the further we fall away from the Christian principles that we were founded on, the closer we come to losing this country. But I have good news. In this week's special July 4th Monday Morning Roll Call, I'm going to talk about proclamations, about recovering what we've lost, and about coming together as a nation and asking God to heal our nation. If you believe in freedom, if you believe in America, if you believe that the push towards anarchism, Marxism, socialism, globalism, and every other anti-American ism that's out there has gone on long enough, then I hope you will join me. Join me in standing for America, standing for law and order, and in reclaiming what has been lost. God bless America. The On the Blue Line podcast starts now.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that Star-Spangled Banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
I love that song. It just does something to me every time I get the opportunity to hear it. Every time I hear the Star-Spangled Banner, it brings back so many memories. It kind of takes me back, and I think about the different 4th of Julys that I've had, the different opportunities that I've had over the years to either be in a small town parade or to stand there waving a little flag at the side. But you know, I think every time I hear that song, it's even a little bit deeper than that. It's a little bit more than that. It's almost like I can envision the bombs bursting in air, and I can see that raggedy old flag for everything that it had gone throughout the evening. And you see the poet looking up at it, and the awe of that moment, that here is this country about to lose, about to be destroyed. And yet, they fought through the night, and they made it. In the flag, it still waves. Welcome. This is the On the Blue Line podcast, and I am your host, Wayne Mulder, and this is our special July 4th edition. I'm very excited to bring to you a little bit different format. I'm going to have a couple monologue sections where I'm going to talk about a few things that I just want to bring to your attention and I just want to discuss with you. And all in line with this July 4th America-themed podcast. But then I also have two really great guests. And for both of them, I'm going to ask them about their favorite July 4th experiences. And then we're going to talk about this country and we're going to get some ideas on what they think as far as recovering this country. So I'm very thankful that you've joined us and I hope that you'll stay with me. My favorite 4th of July experiences are pretty common, I would say, for most people. It's, a parade early in the morning. Definitely, I love the picnics. I've done those over the years. For years, when we were in the northern Indiana area, we would go up to Michigan and we would see a small town parade up there, and then go out and actually watch the fireworks at night near Lake Michigan, so that you could see them near the water. There's something special, I think, and I think a lot of people would agree, getting to see fireworks over the water. There were years that I saw them in Florida off the Gulf Coast, and then in more recent years, we find an inland lake where we go watch them. So I think there's something about that. But I've always loved my favorite 4th of July experiences always resonate around not only fireworks, but just having family and stuff together and celebrating this country, celebrating its independence. I think if you're anything like me, the last few weeks, the last few months have been stressful. You're getting beat down a little bit. Whether we're told 1 minute what's going on in COVID-19 world and, hey, no one can go outside, you can't even leave your house, and we, the government, are going to tell you what's essential and what's not essential, to all of a sudden watching rioting not cause the spread of COVID-19, but brilliant ideas come to the forefront, such as, hey, let's defund law enforcement. And we see a lack of justice in some recent decisions. For instance, what happened in Atlanta. And then here we are again with, now you can't even go outside without a mask because you could riot and it didn't spread COVID-19, but now you does. So what happens? People get beat down. They get frustrated. They just get over it. And if you're feeling that way, trust me, I'm with you. I feel exactly the same. But this message is about hope. It's not about that frustration. It's about, what do we do? What can we do? There's an old poem. It was written in the 1700s, pre the Revolutionary War. And it's a very simple poem. But it says, one man awake awakens another. The second awakens his next door brother. The three awake can rouse a town by turning the whole place upside down. The many awake can cause such a fuss, it finally awakens the rest of us. One man up with dawn in his eyes, surely then multiplies. That is how change is made, right? Change is made by you telling one other person, by you standing strong, by your beliefs, by you saying, you know what, I am not going to let Marxist thought take over the United States of America. I'm not going to let thugs destroy statues and monuments in the United States of America. And then one by one, speaking in truth, we rouse the next person and we tell them. And what happens is we so often get frustrated. We just feel like we have no control, like we just can't control it all. And there's so much going on right now that there's no way to discuss it all in this short podcast. But what I want to encourage you is be willing to look at what opportunities do I have and what can I do to tell somebody else to bring them up to the next level. So joining me now is becoming a very good friend of mine. His name is Adam Bird. He is the founder of Heroes Media Group, and I'm so thankful to have him on the show. I think you're going to enjoy what he has to say. Well, Adam, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. I just wanted to connect real quick. This show, this episode, it's all about the 4th of July and just kind of discussing America and what makes this country great. What can I just start with, maybe what are some of your memories and so forth of the 4th of July and maybe growing up?
Growing up, if I can remember back that long, um, I remember, sitting out and the little sparklers, the kids would run around with the little sparklers, and then we had like the little things that you threw on the ground and like make the popping noise, and you had a parade usually. And I remember as a kid when I was much younger, there was this park that we would go to, and they sold uh, caramel corn popcorn. So it was like fresh popcorn that just popped, and they would take caramel or caramel, depending on what part of this world you're living in.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I gotta be correct because I know people will be like, it's caramel, and they would pour that on the popcorn. And I remember just like getting sticky fingers and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it was always kind of a fond memory.
Yeah, it's those are the good memories. In fact, that was the thing with watermelon. You remember it dripping down off
Oh
your
yeah,
hands, and in my case, touching your sister and driving her crazy, and everything that comes along with it. Those parades. When you talk about small town parades, you rarely get them. It seems like in your big cities. I'm sure they exist here and there, but a lot of times it's your small town
yeah,
parades.
yeah.
What really stood out to you? Was there anything about the parades themselves that stood out to you?
Sometimes you would have like you had your typical like the high school band, and you'd have the mayor of the town, and you have some of the police officers would come in, then the firefighters would bring the fire truck out, and then usually you had one or two like old school cars, special cars that had like the hometown veteran that was in the vehicle as well. And I look back on it, like the parades were never really that like big. They didn't seem to last very long because it was such a small town. But where I grew up, it was like you had what I just mentioned, and then a few tractors, coming in,
Oh
so
yeah.
farmers coming in, and with the taking like the hay trailers and stuff, and people would be standing on the hay trailers and decorate them out a little bit. And that's really all I can remember. I just remember, like I said, going to the parks and watching the fireworks at night, um, and stuff like that. But yeah, that was a long, long time. I mean, you're asking me to think back, 30 plus years.
Oh, Adam, we haven't gotten that old. Well, maybe we have.
Yeah.
So
So
let me ask you,
yeah,
one of the things that really stood out, with the, and some of this is controversial. I'm not going down the controversial road with this, just more of you personally and how it feels.
yeah,
One of the things that stood out to me, because I too grew up trying to go up to small town parades and stuff. In fact, earlier on the show, I talked with my mother, and she talked about the small town parades as well, because that's something that's resonated in our family.
yeah,
And one of the moments in those was often when the flag would pass by and people would stand up. And I would say that for me as a young child, I always remembered the people's reactions to that flag.
yeah.
Do you recall anything like that from when you?
Absolutely. You could always tell who the vets were. It seemed like because and it wasn't like a lot of the time, believe it or not, they didn't have the Vietnam vet, Korean vet, they didn't have the hats or anything. Sometimes they like if it was the VFW or the American Legion, they'd have their hats on, but they always saluted. They were always standing at attention and saluting as the flag went by. And I would probably say it wasn't just the veteran side of things. I would say you would see a lot of people that were sitting in like their lawn chairs, or whatnot, and they would stand up as the flag would go by, and they would just stand there, in silence with the hands to the side, or they would put the hand on their heart as the flag passed. So I
Yeah.
do remember that happening, and I remember as a kid, I remember just it always taught, hey, you stand up when the flag goes by, and that was it. There wasn't any question. You never questioned it. It was just like, okay, that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, Adam, going on and later in life, you went and served this country, and
Yeah,
thank you. You're a veteran,
yeah,
as we've talked about a few times, and I've talked about my working with Heroes Media Group. But as a veteran, now looking back, and when you think of the 4th of July, when you think of the symbolism of things like the flag, or even that small town feeling of just the American people coming together, how has that changed for you? How do you feel now looking at the 4th of July?
you know, for I'll be honestly, like if I'm peeling some layers back here,
Yeah.
when I first got home from my deployment, I didn't look forward to the 4th of July. I didn't want anything to do with it. I didn't. I just, whether it was fireworks or this, I stayed isolated for a couple of years. And my son was still pretty young at that time, and I didn't want him thinking like, oh, well, this is a bad holiday. This is that kind of a thing. I mean, it really is a celebration, right, of our independence as a country.
Right.
And for me, I looked at it, later on, even now, I look at it as a day of kind of us coming together as one. And I won't get into, politics or anything like that, because it doesn't really matter. But I mean, I think nowadays, I think some people uh, has lost that sight of what the meaning of, and this is just Adam Bird's opinion, mind you.
Right.
But I think the meaning of it was like, you look back on that day, like we became a country, right? We became we separated and became our own, kind of our own. And we didn't do that it was just a couple people here and a couple people there. We did that together. Unity. That's the word I'm looking for. 4th of July for me, it's all about unity.
Yeah.
And I think it's sad to say, but I think we're at a time right now in our history that I think some people have lost sight of that.
Yeah. I would agree with you. And I love the point that you make, because absolutely, I mean, if you think about what July 4th signifies, and obviously it was the ratification of the Declaration of Independence. The signing actually didn't take place till August, but the what is so interesting about it is, you're right, it's this treasonous statement,
Yeah,
really, where
right.
we're saying we are going to come together as a new nation under these ideals. These are our grievances, and we're going to come together, and this is what we're going to do.
And a lot of the, you talk about the signing of the Declaration. Currently, I'm 2 hours away from where that took place. You know what I mean? And every time I go to Philadelphia, I always go to Independence Hall and I take the tour, because I've seen it 100 times, but every time that I go, it's still kind of cool, because you're standing there like, whoa, like
Yeah.
you really get that feeling. You know what I mean? And there's and with that, there's a sense of pride uh, with that, because it's kind of like cool. And being somebody that has served, you serve as a community hero in your community and whatnot. I think for individuals like us, we have that, like, hey, we're part of something special, um, and this is where it started.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I would absolutely agree. What it There's no doubt the world has changed. In fact, I think for all of us, the world has changed in the last 6 months.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How do we get back, though? How do we get back to unity?
You
And
know
kind of
what?
a closing question.
You can't. I wish there was an easy answer. We can't hit rewind. You can't just hit the restart button. You can't turn back the clock. Everything that's happened this year has happened for a reason, and it's easy for us to get wrapped up in and it is depressing. I hate to say it, but it's easy to get wrapped up in everything that's going on. But the question that we need to ask is, how do we make the future better? How do we ensure that this doesn't happen again? And the big thing is, we need to educate people. We have to hear, I want to say, both sides of the story, if there's just two sides of a story. But I think in this situation, there's probably half a dozen, and probably more than that. I think you would agree.
Oh, yeah. It's not quite that simple as just two sides.
It's really not. But it all starts with education. You got to educate people, because I think a lot of people are saying a lot of ignorant things, and it's everybody. And I will say, I think we're all guilty in that aspect of it. So to go back to your original question, was how do we go back, or how do we make the future better, so to speak?
Well,
Stop.
and reclaim. So I think you make a very good point.
Yeah.
We can't change the past. In
Right.
fact, I don't think the past changes, which is
Well, here's the thing.
perfect.
If you erase the past, you're more apt to repeat it.
Correct. Correct.
So again, I won't get into the political side of things, what's going on, but I'm going to leave that there. The other thing I would say is, maybe we should stop watching mainstream media, or if you're going to watch mainstream media, here's my answer: think for yourself. Period.
Yeah, I think
Think,
that's a good
think
answer.
for yourself. Think for yourself, and start asking questions.
Yeah.
There's not enough of that going on, and I honestly, in my heart, believe that if you watch the news and you're seeing this and this, and you're not asking questions on why that is or why they're saying that, then yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're part of the problem,
Yeah.
and it won't change. We have to start asking questions, and unfortunately, some of those questions we may not want the answers to, but we need to know in order for the this not to happen again.
You're so correct. And I think that that's a danger we have just with what's going on right this moment, where we're trying to erase things instead of asking hard questions. And it changes the narrative. In fact, it, like you said, it can cause a repeat of those very incidents, but it also doesn't allow us to educate as to, hey, this is what happened and how that ended up happening. And we don't ever want to go there again. These are the steps we take to reclaim or to get where we're going.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm talking about in this episode and as a whole, and just a few minutes ago on it, I spoke about Abraham Lincoln's proclamation, where he talked about fasting and so forth. Do you think, in line of what you're saying, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be religious, because that's one thing people misunderstand sometimes. They're like, oh, well, when you say it's a Christian nation, you think everybody has to be a Christian. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
I'm saying we're founded on Christian principles.
Right.
So my question for you is more in line with what Lincoln said, and when he talked about his fasting and so forth, really the underlying statement there was introspection,
Yeah.
that each one of us needs to kind of go into our own hearts, into our own minds, and say, you know what? I'm going to do what's best for this country as a whole, and what I can do to, like you said, create more of a positive future. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I really don't have anything. I mean, he hit it on the head right there. From a Christianity side of things, I grew up, going to church and whatnot, and I have plenty of friends that I work with on a daily basis that don't necessarily believe in God, but they respect my views on it, and I respect theirs. It's not for everybody, unfortunately. I know what works for me. That's it. And if I can help somebody else, great. As far as what Abraham Lincoln said and the fasting side of it, how many people nowadays do you really think are going to take a look at themselves and take a step back and say, I need to do this to make this country a better place? Probably not a lot of people, unfortunately. Are there people out there? Absolutely. There's two guys right now that you guys are listening to. We believe in that. If we didn't, we wouldn't be doing the show. We wouldn't be doing what we do on a daily basis, quite frankly. It's not just to better us. A lot of the stuff that we do is unselfish, and it's for the betterment of other people. Um, and I'm not, praising what we do by any means. I'm just saying that we can't do it ourselves, and we're asking, at least I'm asking others to look within yourself. And when are you going to put your foot down and say, listen, enough's enough? What can I do to make things better? What can I do to help um, make this change so we can either go back to somewhat of a normal life, or at least see a reduction in hate, see a reduction in crime and all this other stuff. How can we make the world a better place to live?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the question, Adam, and exactly the point that I think this whole show has to do with, because we get so beat down, so demoralized, so under this weight and this heavy burden of what we see in the media, what we see in all these social media being the devil, in my opinion, and
Yeah.
not literally, but I hate social media, and that I'm not ever been shy about saying that. But social media, all these things, it just wears on you, and you get to the point of, what can I do? And that's the reminder, is you can do something, whatever that may look like.
Well, here's what you do. I got an answer for that. Think for yourself. I'm not telling anybody to not watch the news. Well, maybe a little bit, but if you're going to be on social media and if you're going to watch the news, think for yourself at least. Don't just sit there and be like, "Yep, saw it last night on Anderson Cooper, or I saw it on, Fox and Friends, or I saw it on Facebook, so it must be true."
Right.
And then not do yourself any justice by, like, maybe you should do some research. We got this great, everybody's got these smartphones. Everybody, most of the country, most people in the world have some type of computer or smartphone that you can look stuff up. And when you look it up, don't just look it up at one. Well, Google said this. Go to Bing and find it. Oh, I found it on a government site. Great. Find something that's not a government site that talks about the same issue, and then put your own thing together. But that would require you to actually educate yourself on it.
Right. Yeah.
Don't be
To have,
think for yourself.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is crazy, like you just said, to have such unprecedented access to information while simultaneously having such unprecedented ignorance.
Yeah.
Almost seems like maybe we're not taking advantage of what we have at our disposal.
What does Ron White say? Here's your sign.
Yes.
It's
It can be that simple.
yeah.
Well, Adam, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your busy schedule.
Absolutely. Always an honor, my friend.
Thank you so much. You have a happy 4th of July to you and your family.
You as well.
Let me just take a moment and tell you again about my friends over at Campfire Blend and Whiskey Coffee. I've talked before about how I wanted to collaborate with a small business that had a product that I believed in and supported really good people. And that is exactly what Campfire Blend does. However, this week, we're celebrating the 4th of July, so I encourage you, while you're sitting around with friends, with family, whether you're going to go watch the fireworks or whatever you're allowed to do with the whole COVID-19 thing, whatever that is, how about a little whiskey coffee? Brew a little bit, sit around. There's no alcohol in it. However, it does have the flavor and the aroma of whiskey because it has been aged in whiskey barrels. So go over to my friends. It's campfireblend.com, and when you use the code BlueLine at checkout, you're going to save 10% off, and that's BlueLine, all one word. So campfireblend.com and the code BlueLine at checkout saves you 10%, and it helps support this podcast. I think Adam was exactly correct. Sometimes we have to start with introspection. We have to start with looking inwardly, right? I mean, we all say we want change. In fact, if I was to open up my phone right now and look at social media, I would see all sorts of people talking about how they want change. Some in useful and maybe even friendly ways, and many in angry and upset ways. But in one way or another, on multiple sides of the fence, people are constantly saying they want change. And yet, what I seem to find is that what people don't want to do is change themselves. Nor do they want to look back to history and say, well, when some of the biggest changing moments that created this nation came into play, what was considered? What were the things that they were talking about then? I think a good place to start is going back to the Declaration of Independence. It is that declaration that we celebrate on Independence Day. Now, it's not the signing, which is commonly said. That didn't happen until August. However, it was the day that the Declaration of Independence was ratified at the Second Continental Congress. And, when we look at it, and we all come to understand a lot of the language, and you'll hear it put out there quite a bit, such as we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And that's absolutely true. And they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Those are absolute, unchangeable rights. And that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We all know those lines. We hear them over and over again. But what I want to draw your attention to for the purpose of this conversation is the last two sentences of the Declaration of Independence. After they lay down what the rights of the people are, which, by the way, the whole point of governments being instituted among men was to derive their just powers from the consent of the governed and to protect the rights of the people. If at any point we're starting to see government not protect the rights of the people, but rather take the rights from the people, then they are not doing their job, which is clearly laid out in the Declaration of Independence. But again, that's a conversation for another day. Because this is about change. This is about going down that road where we begin to have these hard conversations, where we can begin to say, okay, well, what changes can I do? So the last two sentences of the Declaration of Independence read, "And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence," which is the protective care of God is another word for divine providence. So with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. You know, we have people that won't pledge 10 minutes off of Netflix to do something good. We have people who won't be inconvenienced in any way, shape, or form to do something to change this country. And yet, these gentlemen said that they would pledge their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. I think there's two clues here to change and to the support of this declaration and to the support of this nation. And first of that was that firm reliance on divine providence, which more of that in a moment. And then the mutually pledging to each other. It was a swearing to each other. It was an oath to each other. It's saying, hey, we're going to do this and I'm going to be with you to the bitter end, whatever that may be. Think of the power of that. Think of what the power would be if you and I did that today. You know, we are in a time where people don't want to stand for anything. In fact, we have people in Congress right now and in the Senate that were voted in who could be stopping and standing up. Let me back up. Within the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I've been hearing cry after cry after cry of people saying, you know, we've voted people into office who actually could make a change right now. And yet there doesn't appear to be any leader. Nobody is willing to stand up. Nobody is willing to stand up for what's right. Nobody is willing to put their foot down to this change culture. No one's willing to put their foot down to this woke America and all of this other insanity that's going on right now. We're starting to see it. There are a few. I could name them. There are a few. But it's nothing like what we could be seeing in the change. Because when you speak truth, when you bring light into darkness, that elicits true change. But let me go back to this idea of protection of divine providence, because there seems to be a demoralization that we are experiencing on a couple different levels right now. And people will say, well, I don't know, we can be a moral people, but we don't have to be a religious country, or we were never a Christian country. That's something you'll hear people say from time to time. And the part I wanted to bring up with you is from George Washington's farewell address in 1796. He makes a very clear point on this. And as you read through the entire speech that he was giving, he goes over several different ideas along this line. But he says, "And let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education on minds of peculiar structure, reason, and experience, both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principle." I would say that seems pretty accurate based on today's standards, wouldn't you? There doesn't appear to be a national morality anymore. And as it is falling apart and as we have nothing left to stand on, we end up in these very confusing waters where we can't even, we have courts that can't even properly determine what the word sex means based on the time that it was put out, which is very confusing given the fact that I could do it with a dictionary and I have not been to law school yet. There seems to be a rise of calling good evil and evil good, which we know is a biblical principle. But at the end of the day, we have to get back to what these roots of our country are founded on and to be proud of them. We have a great heritage. We have something that we should all be proud of as Americans. You know, when you see that flag fly by, what does it mean to you? What does it symbolize? Does it stir something up deep inside you? I talked earlier about when, I hear the Star-Spangled Banner, what that does. What about the flag? Does it stir something up inside of you? Does it make you proud to be an American? See, that flag symbolizes things. It symbolizes a lot of things, but it also echoes back to these foundations. It echoes back to the protection of divine providence. It echoes back to our morality that we have based on religious principle as a country. And it echoes back to this mutual pledge between people that we're going to make this country a better place. So I want to introduce you to my next guest. You know, when I started my podcast, one of the privileges that I have is I get to sit down with different people from all different walks of life, and I get to bring in people that I would probably never get to meet in any other way, shape, or form if it wasn't for this podcast. But then the opposite is true. Sometimes I get to bring you people that you may never meet, and yet it's an absolute honor for you to have that opportunity. And this week, my second guest is just that person. She was very reluctant to come on this show. But there is no person, nobody who's had more of an influence on me and on my thought processes and on what I believe when it comes to Americanism, where it comes to freedom, where it comes to liberty, and where it comes to my love of the United States of America. So I approached my mom and I said, Mom, I would love to have you on this show. And she said she'd do it. Again, she was very reluctant, but she said she would. So it is an absolute honor to be able to introduce you to my mom and be able to have a conversation that I think is going to mean something to you and is going to be very important when it comes to the love of this country. So, Mom, welcome to the show.
Hi, Wayne.
Well, let me just ask you, Mom. So here's why I wanted to have you on this program, because this is all about 4th of July and then kind of going down the road of reclaiming America. And what I wanted to do is just kind of dig in, go back to, tell me, I have distinct memories growing up of you talking specifically about the 4th of July. In fact, it's one of my two favorite holidays, as you know, my favorite being Christmas and my other being the 4th of July. So could you tell us, like, what are some of the memories that you used to talk about what your 4th of July was like growing up?
My 4th of July, we'd always go to my Aunt Dot's house. It was my mom's sister, and all my mom's brothers and sisters would gather at Aunt Dot's house with all the cousins and everybody. It was quite a gang when we got there. And we'd know we were getting to Cascade because there was a big hill. We could always see the steeple of the church. And so we know we were there. We'd always go to the parade. But I think that my Uncle Si was the Uncle Sam in the parade. And then we always liked Aunt Dot's house because she had a pool.
Well, that's important on those hot summers, that's for sure.
So we'd go in the pool and stuff during the day, and we always had watermelon. I can remember sitting outside by the picnic table and eating the watermelon. And then when the day was done with, we'd go to the fireworks. Some of us would sit on the hood of the car and watch the fireworks from up there when we were smaller and stuff, and it was just a wonderful day.
What? So it seems to me that you'd talk about a memory, and I don't know if it's specific to the 4th of July parades or if it was just a memory of Grandpa, who would be my grandpa, your father, that you speak about when the flag would come by, the flag of the United States of America. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, whenever the flag would go by, I would look up and I'd see, I don't know if I can talk, and I'd see tears in my dad's eyes. For some reason, he was not in the war, World War II. I had uncles that were, but my dad wasn't, and I don't know why, but he seemed to just have a special love for that flag. And I know that he did help take some ladies to the factories and stuff, that he drove them into the factory where he worked. And I don't know if maybe they did things for the war. I don't know. But I just knew that my dad loved that flag. And that's something that meant a lot to me.
Well, and I know for me as a child growing up that hearing the story of him tearing up, and I didn't know my grandfather that well as I was quite young when he passed, but hearing that story has always resonated with me. And you know, Mom, even as you tell this story and you talk about seeing the steeple of the church when you come into town in Cascade, and you talk about the flag passing by and grandfather tearing up, it makes me think about the importance of symbols. What does the flag mean to you as a symbol growing up? When you did, and of course, you're still 21. I know that, but we'll say for someone who was born pre 1950 but is still 21, we'll go with that. But what is the importance of the flag as a symbol for you, Mom?
The flag just means everything. I mean, it stands for my country. Um, the country where, God had me placed in this wonderful country of America. And when I see a flag go by, it just reminds me also of those who have served this country. I mean, I knew some people who were in the Vietnam War and lost their lives. And my uncles and them faced some horrible things in the World War that they were in, and things like that. And it just stands for the freedoms that I have, and for what I could say and what I could do. And it's just my country when I see that flag.
Has the world changed? Has America changed since you were a little girl?
Oh, yes.
Do you still see, though? I think that statement goes obviously without saying. And, even heck, America has changed for all of us in the last 6 months. But do you still see, when you go to a small town celebration on the 4th of July, or you get out maybe away from certain parts of the U.S., do you still see that pride in country? Do you still have hope for that there's still people that love this country?
Yeah, I still see that. I mean, most of the time, the places where we go, that the people will stand up for the flag. On the 4th of July parades and stuff where I've gone down here, I see people standing up for the flag, when the flag goes by and this kind of stuff. So there's still that reverence with some people for the flag and for our country and for our freedoms that we have.
Is that important to the next generation? Is that important that we instill that in the younger people? Is that something that you foresee maybe we losing if we don't keep instilling that in the younger generation?
Yeah, we got to let them know, that the freedoms we have were fought for. They weren't just given to us. We just didn't, all of a sudden we have all these freedoms. No, they fought for those freedoms. People gave their lives for those freedoms to keep our country what it is, to keep that love for the flag and that love for our country, the United States of America, which is the best country in the world.
So let me ask you, what should, in your opinion, and I know I don't think the president's listening, but in case he is, in your opinion, what should America do to reclaim what it's been lost in the most recent years? What's the path? What would you say we should do towards reclamation?
We need to look at who's trying to keep America the way it was years ago and who wants everything to be new and different and all these weird ideas. And we need to stand up for what we believe in and what is right. You always need change. I mean, there's always things that we can learn and better, but seems like the changes we're wanting are not better, but worse.
What is another change that you've seen in America that's kind of slipped away since the time that you were a little girl and needs to be recovered in order for us to stay on track and kind of get back to the country that we're meant to be?
I believe that we need to turn back to God. I think we've left God behind in the equation, and it says in God we trust. And I think we need to go back to trusting in God and being willing to do what He wants us to do.
Can that be done? Do you think that it can be done, that we can get back to that path?
I don't know if we can go completely back to the path. I don't know. But I think we can sure come a long ways from where we're at now. Right now, our laws and everything don't even reflect the Lord. this abortion thing that they just did is horrible. It's taking babies who are about to be born and killing them.
Where do you think the answer lies? Do you think it lies in a change in government? Or do you think that it's broader than that, that it requires we as a people getting back to maybe making a proclamation saying, you know what, in God we trust, and we're going to recover that. And we've gone down some paths that we didn't need to go down to, that we shouldn't have gone down, but we're not going to do that anymore. What do you think? Does it lie in the government side, or do you think it lies in coming together as a Christian people and making a proclamation on what we're going to do going forward?
I think it lies in prayer to God and going to God and saying, God, I let my nation become a mess. And, you know, I'm a Christian and I stayed with the Lord, but yet I probably didn't pray as much as I should have for my country. And I probably let some things go on that I didn't stand up against and things like that. And so I first need to go to God and say, oh, God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that our nation has turned away from you and that I probably didn't pray as much as I should have for my government and for my presidents and all this stuff. So please forgive us and then help us to spread abroad who you are and what it means to trust in God. What our country was founded upon.
Well, Mom, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Any final thoughts?
Just that I know that God is the answer. And I don't know what's going to happen with this mess, but I do know that God is still in control, and I'm trusting him that he'll give people wisdom to know what to do.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Mom, I love you. Thank you for coming on.
I love you.
What an absolute privilege to be able to interview my mom on this show. I hope you enjoyed it. You know, what a thing when I heard her interview is I heard her love for this country. And I even heard her tear up a little bit. And that story always resonated with me my whole life. Every time I would hear her talk about my grandfather tearing up when the flag would go by. You know, I think that this country and its symbolism should invoke that kind of feeling. I don't understand when you can be in the greatest country, probably ever at this point, and not feel a sense of pride in the opportunities that we've been given and the gift that we've been given. So, you've heard two different ideas. You've heard the ideas of introspection, which these aren't different as in a dichotomy, but rather just two different ideas, both of which are equally as important, looking inside and looking up. You know, there was another time in the United States when we were extremely divided. In fact, you could argue we were even more divided. And of course, that was the time of the Civil War. In March of 1863, the Senate, when they did things like this, sent the President of the United States, who would have been Abraham Lincoln, a proclamation. And the beginning of it states that the Senate of the United States, devoutly recognizing the supreme authority and just government of Almighty God in the affairs of men and nations, by a resolution requested the President to designate and set apart a day for national prayer and humiliation. Wow. If that doesn't excite you a little bit and wish that we could maybe recover a little bit of that in our legislature, that would be absolutely amazing. We seem to be bowing and putting on garb from other continents and doing all sorts of things in the legislature. Maybe we could start with devoutly recognizing the supreme authority of God, but I digress. The reason I wanted to bring this up is the middle of this. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the middle of this, you could take the word Civil War out of it, and you could have written it this year. And it says, and insomuch as we know that by his divine law, nations like individuals are subjected to punishments and chastisements in this world, may we not justly fear that the awful calamity, in the words of civil war, are included, which now desolates the land, may be but a punishment inflicted upon us for our presumptuous sins, to the needful end of our national reformation as a whole people. But this is the part I want to read to you, because this is what I think is absolutely where we're at. We have been the recipients, this is a quote, we have been the recipients of the choicest bounties of heaven. We have been preserved these many years in peace and prosperity. Haven't we? Is that not absolutely where we've been? And I'll read on, quoting again. We have grown in numbers, wealth, and power, as no other nation has ever grown. But we have forgotten God. We have forgotten the gracious hand which preserved us in peace, and multiplied and enriched and strengthened us. And we have vainly imagined in the deceitfulness of our hearts that all these blessings were produced by some superior wisdom and virtue of our own. Intoxicated with unbroken success, we have become too self-sufficient to feel the necessity of redeeming and preserving grace, too proud to pray to the God that made us. God help us. Is that not exactly where we're at? Anymore, it's a sign of weakness to show true humility, to bow before God. It's acceptable to bow before Marxist organizations, but it doesn't seem to be acceptable to bow before God anymore. I think something's wrong. Instead of humility, we have unprecedented arrogance, right? Don't you see it? Don't you see it with some of the people that we have contact with, even ourselves sometimes? Instead of abstaining from secular pursuits and uniting at public places, as they went on to write in there, we have government stating that places of worship are non-essential. So here's what I want to encourage you. This isn't meant to be negative. It's meant to be positive. So there's 3 things that came to mind as I wanted to put together this July 4th special for you. You know, if we're going to reclaim America, if we're going to recover America, one thing, and I love this idea of a proclamation, a swearing between you and between me and between others in this country, that this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to stake everything on. But there's 3 things that I want to encourage you to do. First, we need to look inside. As my interview with Adam Bird said, we have to look inside ourselves. We have to determine where we've gone wrong. What do we need to do differently? Secondly, we need to look out. We're fellow Americans. We are all Americans. Chances are, if you're listening to this, you probably definitely are an American. And here's the thing. We do ourselves a lot of disservice when we start breaking that apart. There are those who have a vested interest in keeping us separated. You have to see that. Even the use of like hyphenated terms to describe blank this American, blank American, blank American. We're all Americans. We're all united by one flag in one country. We've got to come back to that. And then third, what I want to suggest to you is to look up. We no longer should be too proud to pray to the God that made us, as the Senate said in 1863. Can you imagine the power if we all came together and said, you know what? I want to actually see real difference in this country. And we're going to go back to, we're not going to be separated by change culture. I'm not going to point out every little thing that you're doing that bothers me and try to make you to change it. We're not going to have cancel culture. Just because I don't like something, I also truly believe in free speech. So I am not going to make that disappear. But what I am going to do is I'm going to stay true to God's word. I'm going to concentrate on helping others, and I'm going to work on bettering myself. Can you imagine if we all made that proclamation, if we made that promise, how much different this country would be? The change that we could see in this country? I think it would be phenomenal. I think it would absolutely bring about real and lasting change. So I want to encourage you today. I want to leave you with this final thought. Well, 2 final thoughts. The first being, I think we need to mutually pledge. Between you, wherever you are in your car, driving around, and me, Wayne. And then with every other person you come into contact with today who's an American. And just say, listen, I pledge my life. And mean it. Like, do you really pledge your life? Is freedom so important to you? Is this country so important to you? Is the independence that we have so important to you that you would actually pledge your life? Do you know what that means? I mean, you do realize that this literally was pledging their life. Like they could be hung. And sadly, if we keep going down some of the roads we're going down, it could mean that here again. Are you willing to pledge your life? Are you willing to pledge your fortunes? And are you willing to pledge your sacred honor? I encourage you to do that. And I encourage each of us to do that with each other as a nation, as one nation under God, this 4th of July, to do something different. Come together with your family. You know, COVID-19 has forced everybody into the house together anyway. Talk to your kids. Talk to your loved ones. Talk to your spouse. Talk to your neighbors. Have a conversation with them. Find out what they believe, where they stand. But more importantly, we know that we have these common beliefs because they are codified. They are written down in these aged documents. My suggestion, if you don't have a pocket constitution, if you don't have a copy of the Declaration of Independence, go get one. There's some great books out there. I actually have one called the American Patriots Handbook. It has pretty much all of these old documents in it and in a written form. And go over them with your kids. Go over them with your family. And remember what it is that made America great in the first place. So I want to leave you with this final stanza from the Star-Spangled Banner. Oh, thus be it ever when free men shall stand between their loved home and the war's desolation. Blessed with victory and peace may the heaven-rescued land praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation. Then conquer we must, when our cause it is just, and this be our motto, in God is our trust. And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph shall wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. God bless you. Happy Independence Day to you and your family. For more information about what we're doing, be sure to visit us at OnTheBlueLine.com. Again, OnTheBlueLine.com.